Very good. We come to the last talk of the afternoon, which is given by Professor Harvey Feinberg. Harvey Feinberg is the former provost at Harvard University. He then became the president of the Institute of Medicine of the US. He was a very influential, long-standing person shaping academic medicine in the States in a very important way. The Institute of Medicine is now the medical academy of the US, and we're very happy to have him, hopefully, on the screen. I see him up there. Hello, Harvey.
Can't hear you yet. Maybe.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us? Hello, can you hear us?
Now I do.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
Thank you. Marvelous. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you at this symposium on a culture of collaboration. I'm going to be speaking today on the topic of international collaboration through the national academies. We have heard through the day about many avenues and forms of collaboration in research. I'm going to be speaking specifically about this class of institutions around the world and their role in promoting and carrying out collaboration in scientific research. During the course of my presentation, I'm going to be covering 4 key topics. The first is to describe what I call the 10C spectrum of international relations, just to provide context for the nature of relations across international boundaries. Secondly, I'm going to be dealing with a central tension in global research in the context of global relations, namely the tension between competition and collaboration. Third, I will turn specifically to the reasons that national academies and consortia that include national academies have a special role to play in international collaboration in research. And I'll give a number of examples then of the kind of collaboration which has gone on in the past and is going on today across international boundaries through the efforts of national academies. Let's begin then with this notion of the 10C spectrum of international relations. At the worst end, in a sense, the most hostile is direct conflict. This is wars, as we've seen now remarkably, strikingly, astonishingly in Europe, as well as in other places around the world. But short of international conflict is a direct confrontation between nations. For example, the situation between much of the Western world and Iran today. A very common position between nations is a relation of competitiveness, striving to exceed or add influence relative to others. Short of competition is a notion of peaceful coexistence. This is a form of neutrality, sometimes relatively relaxed, sometimes relatively wary, but basically live and let live. Coming more toward the positive side is communication across international boundaries, in which the goal is to keep one another mutually informed. Beyond communication is the idea of consultation. This is being mutually informed, but also open to influence on the part of the alternative nation, the partner. The difference between communication and consultation is illustrated at the time the United States under President Ronald Reagan invaded Grenada. And Grenada was at the time, of course, a part of the British Commonwealth. The US had informed Britain of its plan literally that same day, but not consulted. Mrs. Thatcher reportedly called the president of the US and said, Ronnie, communication is not consultation. Beyond consultation is the notion of cooperation, actually affecting the way one operates according to what the interests and goals are of the other, looking for some degree of sharing in the independent operations, but still working toward a shared goal. Beyond that, coordination implies a level of strategic adjustment so that the way in which one proceeds toward one's goals is influenced and synchronized to a degree with the partner in international relations. Collaboration, which is the way we often refer in scientific research, implies a combination of sharing of goals and sharing of strategy, so that one works together with the partner toward achieving a shared objective. And finally, combination implies a joining of forces into a singular entity so as to more effectively accomplish one's goals. Sometimes the motive may be scale and finance, major projects like the Large Hadron Collider in science, for example, in which there's a unifying reason to come together to work jointly on solving a particular problem or meeting a scientific objective. By and large, in the normal course of international relations, there are many drivers toward competition. The key elements of national security or national defense naturally lead each nation to want not to fall behind technologically or in any other communications or relevant force for defense relative to others around the world. A second major driver is economic prosperity. These are often grounded as win-lose rather than win-win, which is also an important part of economic progress internationally. But in general, science as a tool for assuring economic prosperity is grounded in a kind of competitive spirit. These are in turn related to geopolitical rivalries, often ideologically based, but sometimes simply growing out of a long history of rivalrous relations. And finally, there's a sense of cultural or historic destiny that can drive one nation to find itself or believe in itself, believe in its own role and leadership ahead of others. In the United States, I would confess the vast majority of argument to the United States Congress about why science matters and why the nation should continue to invest in science is often grounded in this sense of competitiveness. One can look, for example, at our own national academies of sciences, engineering, and medicine, series of reports, many more than a dozen over recent years, that really are grounded in this idea of science as a tool to promote national competitiveness. This series called Rising Above the Gathering Storm a decade ago is just a prime example of this class of argument about science as a tool of national competitiveness. At the same time, for a number of reasons, one can argue about the importance of science as a vehicle and a way of furthering international collaboration and partnership. These begin with the recognition that many of the challenges we face in the world are truly transnational or global, namely, they cannot really be solved by any one nation working in isolation or in competition. Problems such as pandemics, we're still experiencing climate disruption, food sustainability, environmental conservation, ocean degradation, species loss, antimicrobial resistance, cybersecurity. The list goes on of issues that transcend national boundaries and call for a global collaborative response. Secondly, we often refer to universal scientific values, the search for truths of nature, the truths that are universal and not domestic or international. We make the case for collaboration in terms of our shared humanity and common destiny on the globe. These are all motives that push toward collaboration, but we really need to recognize that these two tensions for competition and collaboration often stand in tension with one another and represent pulls toward opposite poles of relations that national academies, among other institutions, have a very important place in pushing nations more toward the constructive, positive, collaborative side and away from the competitive, confrontational, or even conflictual side. When we consider global science, there are many actors on the scene that are relevant, certainly beginning with international agencies, the UN, the World Health Organization, World Trade, World Bank, and so on. The major actors of the nation states and their agencies, non-government organizations, universities, academic institutions, think tanks, philanthropies, individual scientists and scholars, and then the national academies and their international associations. And in the remainder of my remarks, I want to focus specifically then on the role of national academies as vehicles to accomplish collaboration in scientific research. National academies are by no means a uniform organization in different countries around the world. They vary in their design, they vary in their function. They are generally speaking honorific in association, but differ in the range of fields that are covered. Some, for example, incorporate humanities, whereas others are limited to sciences, or include sciences and engineering, or sciences and medicine. In the case of the US, science, engineering, and medicine together in a single legal entity. They range across the board in terms of the nature of criteria for membership, though most of them have a strong honorific basis, as I mentioned a moment ago. Some are more restrictive, have a limited number, for example. Others are more open and continue to elect. They have different criteria by relation of age or field of study. They differ in their legal and organizational relations to other academies within the national boundary of any individual academy, sometimes relatively independent and sometimes legally integrated. They vary tremendously in their relation to government. Some academies are fundamentally vehicles of government or mechanisms for carrying out scientific research within a country. Other academies stand apart from their governments as independent resources for those nations. And finally, they do differ in their roles, direct or indirect, in relation to scientific research. But what most of the academies share are senses of representing the best of science within their membership, expertise across the spectrum of scientific fields. Typically, not universally, but typically, they do represent an independent force within the hierarchy or array of institutions that bear on science, apart from many other government agencies. The membership in many academies have a long history of service and of volunteerism, that is to contribute to science in policy and policy about science within the national boundaries. And in these ways, many of the academies have a long history of serving with an advisory function to guide policy, practice, priorities, direction of resources in science as in related technological and health fields. Now, let me turn back to this spectrum of relations to illustrate some of the ways in which national academies have historically and are today cooperating across the board in terms of scientific responsibility. And I want to start with an example that literally shows going from the extreme of confrontation all the way to a combined effort that remarkably has continued for a half a century. This is the example of the International Institute of Applied Systems Analysis that this year is celebrating its 50th anniversary. Its origin began with a speech that then President Lyndon Johnson delivered in 1966, in which he praised the possibility of scientific collaboration. Alexei Kosygin, the premier of the USSR at that time, responded favorably, and there was a preliminary organizing meeting that was held in England in 1968, followed by negotiations aimed at a more serious effort in Moscow in 1969. There were many, many issues that had to be worked through to put forward this collaborative effort for science. Who would be part of the enterprise, the balance east from west? Where would it be located? And it moved in idea from England to France to Austria and Vienna, where it continues to this day. There was tremendous conflictual discussion across the charter, how it would be governed, how it would be funded, its relation to government. There was intense discussion about who would participate, how scientists would be selected, where they would come from. They had to set boundaries on research agenda and identify some topics that they just wouldn't tackle because they were too close to the competitive side, too difficult and contradictory to the purpose of collaboration. And they even had a lot of trouble on the name. I will tell you that the principal individual who was driving this throughout the negotiation, Professor Howard Rafa at Harvard, who was the key designer, he actually came forward with the proposal about the name because he had written a book that he called Applied Statistical Analysis, and he realized no one really understood exactly what they meant by that title. And so Applied Systems Analysis was a sufficiently vague, inclusive construct that everyone could agree that it was unobjectionable, and every other proposal from one side had an objection on the other. Beyond Professor Rafa, key government officials played a very important role in this international collaboration. German Viciani from the USSR, informal academic associations, particularly the Club of Rome and Aurelio Pecce, were very important in this discussion early on. Private foundations, particularly in the United States, provided flexible administrative funding that allowed the organization to actually get started in a practical way. But the reason I'm introducing this remarkable example that continues to this day is because the US National Academies, and particularly its leader, the president of the National Academy of Sciences at that time, Philip Handler, was the chief US negotiator, taking over from McGeorge Bundy And the National Academy of Sciences also served as the non-governmental funding conduit from the United States to support the International Institute. The original money did come from the National Science Foundation, the United States government, but as a conduit, it set a mark of independence for EASA, which was very important at the time. And the Royal Society in the United Kingdom also, at that time, with Solly Zuckerman from South Africa as its leader, had a very critical role. Now, that's a historic example, but let me cite some current illustrations of the ways in which national academies are promoting scientific collaboration across boundaries. The first I want to describe originated in 2015 on human genome editing. This is a fraught subject filled with ethical as well as technological considerations. And in this effort, the US, UK Royal Society, and Chinese Academy of Sciences have been collaborating on a series of symposia and consensus reports on the purposes, the technologies, the ethical, legal, and social implications of human genome editing. The first two summits, held respectively in Washington in 2015 and Hong Kong in 2018, will be followed next year by a planned further discussion in London in 2023. Another broader and more inclusive international collaboration with the National Academy of Engineering in the US and the Royal Academy of Engineering in UK and Chinese Academy in Beijing also deals with the topic of COVID, very fraught subject again, especially in relation to its origin, but here the focus was on engineering's role in catalyzing the response, recovery, and resilience to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this last year, a series of exchanges across these academies developed improvements in scientific and clinical knowledge, sharing of public health strategies, engineering components of vaccines, and systems approaches to testing and therapeutics. A third illustration, which includes 10 sponsors, national academies, and others in various ways, is a remarkable collaboration started in 2019 on healthy longevity, the aspiration for a long and healthy lives, universal in the world. And this collaboration includes so far 3 rounds of funding of research and projects around the globe, approximately 150 funded in each year. And the 10 participants have now agreed to 3 additional years of collaborative support and funding. One of the reasons such international collaborations among national academies are fostered and promoted is the existence of collaborative organizations such as the Inter-Academy Partnership, which now represents more than 140 members of national academies of sciences and medicine and some engineering. These are organized in 4 regional networks around the world and specifically focus on enabling national academies to find avenues of collaboration with one another. A good example of that collaboration is a grand challenge on climate change, human health, and equity. This was just launched a couple of years ago remarkably during the COVID pandemic, but it stresses research on evidence-based strategies on the relation of global climate change to human health, strategies that can be applied globally. The aim is to develop approaches to mitigation, also to provide avenues for technical assistance on mitigation and adaptation, and to become a resource for more open sharing of tools and data so that knowledge and approaches can be more widely available around the world. The Inter-Academy Partnership is not the only vehicle for national academies and others to cooperate. The International Network for Governmental Science Advice under the auspices of the International Science Council provides a forum for policy-interested academies and academics individually to share their experience, build capacity, develop theoretical and practical approaches to improving the place of science and scientific evidence in informing policy at all levels of government. This enables individual practitioners to join and participate, as well as institutional members to be a part of the dialogue and collaboration. A good example of a project under the auspices of the International Network is a collaboration on zoonotic spillover in the animal food chain supply in Southeast Asia. This kind of zoonotic spread is at the heart of the origin of pandemics. This represents especially the network based in Asia, but also globally, with the active participation of the US National Academies. This actually has been launched just earlier this year already. 4 workshops have been planned to be followed by a guidebook on strategies, policies, measures, and practices to prevent and mitigate zoonotic spillover. Really a central challenge for pandemic prevention and a very difficult topic to take up government to government. It is possible, however, to engage in this kind of constructive collaboration on a critical set of scientific questions through the roles of the national academies working in concert to one another. This is not to produce a single global recommendation, but rather to tailor advice and guidance to the specific situations in different countries. I just want to mention, in addition, another collaboration, particularly in the engineering academies, the International Council of Academies in Engineering and Technological Sciences, that serve as another non-political or apolitical, non-governmental international basis for collaboration. In summary, the national academies represent a very important resource. I think that Peter Meyer-Abt would heartily endorse the importance of scientific collaboration across national boundaries as being in the larger public interest and a vital goal for continued pursuit, despite the tension between national competition and global collaboration. Science either as a tool to promote individual national interests and as a vehicle to assure collaboration and learning. I believe that these side channel continued collaborations, apart from government to government first channel or so-called back channel secret negotiations, the side channel open but non-governmental relations in these national academies represents a very important vehicle for continued improvement in international relations, and particularly in the solution to transnational scientific challenges. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to the discussion.
Very much, Harvey, for this fantastic talk and this very optimistic outlook. I'm sure there are questions. If not, let me ask a first question. International tensions, we have them at the moment massively, and there is discussion within our institutions, but also in the public press, how we should deal with Russian scientists. Should we exclude them? Should we do the contrary? What is your experience on the level of the academies?
It's very challenging now to do any direct new relations with any organizations in Russia. I frankly think the best we can manage at this particular moment of conflict is to try to sustain pre-existing working relations such as EASA that I mentioned. Its long-standing existence gives some hope that that can continue to be a vehicle for person-to-person scientific exchange. But you know, war, when it occurs, dominates all other considerations for that time. And unfortunately, that's the state of relations that we currently find ourselves. I personally, and through the national academies, would try to remain in a posture of responsiveness to any overture or outreach on the side. You know, it's often said, you don't make peace with your friends. So you have to have some channels of communication at some point in time in order to conclude hostilities. And in that way, some side and back channel operations are going to be vital. But doing much in the public or in a major way right now is just, I think, too difficult.
More questions? Susan Gasser.
Thank you for the expose. It was very informative. I'm Susan Gasser. I have, again, a question about globalization. So obviously your view is one that we all live together in a global world. We have to share science, and science is a way to appease or to avoid conflict. But it's clear that whereas US and Europe can agree on things like DORA and open science, and we have quite a similar mindset about many of the fundamental aspects of research. Countries like China, which have many US and European trained scientists, if you sequence any human genome, even pay for it, in China, nothing leaves the country. So what role do academies play in potentially changing attitudes of countries from policies that probably are detrimental to scientific sharing?
Oh, thank you, Susan, for the question and very important issue. In fact, it's precisely for the reasons that you described that I believe collaborative relations across national academies is so vital. After all, if you want to reinforce the universal norms of science and ethical conduct of science, the best way to achieve that is through dialogue, open discussion, listening as well as expressing one's views about the importance of reinforcing these core humanistic principles that underlie progress in science, such as the ones you described: openness in science, respect for the integrity of the individual, the capacity to share data and findings and to test. Scientific findings are universal. They are not accurate only up to the border of a nation. So for precisely the reasons that you are describing, that there can be differences in the nature of practices until and unless there can be global norms, universal norms that are articulated, subscribed to, pointed to, and adhered to. That to me is really our best avenue to instill universal values of integrity and rigor and reproducibility, openness in science across the globe. It's not easy, and as you point out, it's not uniform, but to me, it's our best avenue for making progress.
Questions? If this is not the case, many thanks again, Harvey, for this fantastic presentation.
My pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.